We're going to talk about another very important topic in finance. This is the topic of risk and return. The two most important topics in finance are probably net present value and risk and return. So we'll start off with the introduction to risk. And our objectives for this chapter are to compute realized or total return, calculate standard deviation, differentiate between a sample and the population, and contrast idiosyncratic risk with systematic risk, and what's the risk premium for taking each on. If you look here, you can see the stock price history for a company called Countrywide Finance Corporation from January 2003 to January 2008. And you can see over different holding periods, what's the return on this stock? And you can see it varied greatly. The risk is that you may not get the return you're expecting. If you bought Countrywide stock for $13.64 in 2003 and sold it when it peaked in January 2007 at $45, what was your annualized return? We'll solve for this in Excel. Similarly, what if we held it another 6 months and sold it at $28.17? What's our return? And if we sold it in January 2008 when it was selling for $6.96, what was your return? So using Excel, we would use the rate function. Future value for the first one is 45. N is 4 years. Payment 0, just one item. Present value, what you paid, minus $13.64. Now that minus $13.64 will stay in all of our calculations. Everything and payment will stay as 0. So you can see if you were smart enough to sell it 4 years later, you got a nice return, $34.77. What if you thought, though, let me hold it a bit longer? Now N is 4.5 and future value is 28.17. Our return is a little about less than 17.5%. What if you said, let me hold it for 5 years? Then you can see that your return is negative. So you certainly didn't buy the stock for a negative return. This is the risk that you may not get the return you wanted. Now we can look over investor history, and what if one of your ancestors or grandparents perhaps were smart enough to put $100 into different investments. How would that have grown from in the 1920s out to the early 2000s? And our choices are the S&P, large stocks, small stocks, a world portfolio, corporate bonds, or treasury bills. And on this graph, you can see that the small stocks perform the best, and $100 would have grown to the beginning of 2012 to more than $2.5 million. The large stocks, about $275,000. The world portfolio, about $119,000. Corporate bonds, about $20,000. Treasury bills, just $2,000. It's still not a bad return over this 80-year period. So the small stocks had the highest return, but they also had the greatest fluctuation in price. Higher risk means we will require a higher expected return. May not realize it, but that's what we're saying. If we've got to take risk, we want to see a higher return. We're going to assume, therefore, that we are risk averse. Next, we will calculate return.